just wanted again to introduce Ilya Budraitskis and Natasha Kraevskaya, you know already. And the reason actually we are here, and also that this is part of the public program, is somehow that one of the questions that for a foreigner from foreign clothes like me from Poland coming here to work was the question: what is actually happening with all these revolutionary museums? You know, what is happening with these sites of cult and sites of certain pilgrimage after the end of the revolution? And one of the very first places I visited here in December when I first came, we met with Ilya Orlov, and he told me, I'm actually an artist, but I'm also a historian, and I'm a historian in residence here in this museum in Razliv, which, as we heard earlier, was before having 500,000 visitors per year, and now it's like 50,000 maximum. So like it tells us, and even the public transport, you know, there is no public transport to this place anymore. There used to be so much, and the traffic, and it's only, you could really have to make an effort to come here. You know, the closest train station is 7 kilometers away. So, and I found it extremely interesting how Ilya and Natasha are looking at this place, how they are looking at what they call the adventures of the Soviet ideology in today's times. You know, so what is actually happened in this post-revolutionary and post-ideological moment. And also it's interesting how one who is at the same time an artist and a historian, so having the knowledge but also having this capacity as an artist to recontextualize things, you know, to alienate them somehow or look at them differently. And so I'm very glad that all this came together, and at the end you probably have seen already there is a little exhibition referring also to the modes of exhibition and of modes of audience looking at this Lenin, for example, Greek study, or Lenin fetish objects. Firewood. Yeah, so Ilya will tell about it, and Ilya Budraitskis is actually also sharing knowledge of a historian and art historian. At the moment you are a curator in SCCA in Moscow, so working with art and artists, but actually before you've been also an employee of a revolutionary museum. I guess it was Museum of 1905, Revolution in Moscow, and you had your own adventures with it because you had to quit this job, and so that would be also very interesting to hear from you what happens with this ideology of the revolution, and how also art actually capable of giving us also another reading, you know, or another understanding of it. So, Ilya, do you want to make just little introduction, very short, where we are, and then Ilya Budraitskis will.
First of all, the permanent exhibition here is not original Soviet exhibition. It was built in 2006. This exhibition replaced the old classical Soviet exhibition that me and Natasha recreate in a fragment of that, recreate in our project, in our room in the very end of this pavilion. So we tried not to do exactly contemporary art exhibition, but we tried to cross the border of contemporary art, border between museum exhibition and contemporary art exhibition. To be more precise, exhibition of historical museum, revolutionary museum, and exhibition of contemporary art. Actually, we don't show any new object for any author's object in this exhibition. All of these objects was shown before. It was shown in this pavilion, or like a postcards here you see at the wall, postcards of so-called Lenin sites, just a forest or just a field, but it's Lenin sites. It was shown before, it was printed in mass. So now I think Ilya can start his lecture, and we can back to exhibition, maybe to the agenda of our project after lecture and questions and discussion.
Thank you. I was really happy when Ilya invited me to participate in his project, because in fact I find a lot of common of our experiences with such museums, with the so-called historical revolutionary museums, because during 1 year I was employed in the same type of museum, which is the branch of the Central State Museum for Contemporary Russian History, and which is dedicated to the first Russian Revolution of 1905. So during 1 year I had very energetic and very impressive experience of working there, and then I was fired kicked out from this museum.
When
after it was so I was fired last October.
October which year?
Last year, 2013. And I was fired after the exhibition which was dedicated to the 20th anniversary of the Moscow events of 1993, so of the Yeltsin coup, of the conflict between president and parliament, and all this still very unclear and very problematic pages of the post-Soviet history. But in fact, this exhibition, which was the case, the last reason after I was fired, it was a part of some story with this museum where I tried to somehow to realize it as a place of contradiction, as a very strange, controversial place. And I believe that all of you, after visiting that Lenin's house, and now we're sitting here, feel that this is a strange place, because that place was built for one reason, now this reason disappeared. No one can answer you clearly what is the reason for these museums by now, so why they exist, what they are narrating, for what they really need. So this, so every time when you try to ask these very simple questions, the questions about the current place of this kind of spaces, and what you can call the ideology of the state, ideology of the society. Ideology is a kind of organizational practice of society, to use a certain term. So the reason why these museums were established, quite clear. So they were established. So this museum was founded in 1925, and museum where I worked in Moscow was founded in 1924. And the stories were very similar, because my museum was founded also by a revolutionary himself, the person who tried to memorize his own experience, and that was the reason of the, you can say, the first wave of establishing this kind of museums. So the people who were participating in the revolution personally, who were oppressed, who were defeated, became winners, and somehow they tried to memorize that moment, and that was a very interesting moment. I mean, in the terms of the history, because this turn from the oppressed to the winners, it was the turn which happened very rapidly and happened in just a few years. The people who were nothing, they became all. and they understand what is the real historical meaning of this moment, of this story, from the oppressed to the winners. By the way, in the same time, there was extremely interesting and important historical project. There was magazine, and there was a society with the thousands and thousands of members, which was called the Society of the Former Political Prisoners, which published their own magazine. And that magazine was closed by Stalin in 1932, I think. But this magazine was really amazing because it was a historical magazine, but written not by historians, but by people who were participating in history and who just write their own notes, their own memories, and their own experience. So that magazine and that society also played a kind of role of very special psychological praxis of the sharing of experience with the people who have the same past and who join to the very different post-revolutionary present. So that was the first reason of this kind of museums. So that was exactly the continuation of the political logic of the revolution. What was the second wave? The second wave was after the war, in the end of 40s, 50s, and the last wave was the beginning of 70s. So when it was the 100 years anniversary of Lenin's birth, when it was 70 years anniversary of the first Russian Revolution of the 1905. So in the beginning of 70s, you had a number of these anniversaries, which give the energy for this last wave of building of such memorial places. And of course, their meaning was completely different than the meaning of these places from the beginning, because. I mean, even if you look at this building, you realize how far it is from any kind of individual human experience. So that is something that stayed behind any kind of human experience, and that is very cold, big monument of the revolution that happened. The main message of this kind of museums for the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who visited these places, like Lenin's memorial in Ulyanovsk, like Gorky, where Lenin died near Moscow, like this place, and many others, because their special ideological role was to present on one side the genealogy of the Soviet society, which started from the revolution. But on the other side, this type of spaces, they represent the real end of history. The end of history, because that revolution happened in 1970. It was so crucial, it was so great, that you have no chance ever repeat it again.
I have one question. Is this architecture from then? It is initially built like this?
It was built in 1964 by Soviet architect Kirchhoff in very fashionable at this time minimalist style. Sorry, Ilya.
Yes. But if you look generally in all this kind of museums which were built in 60s, 70s, and so on. So, well, and you have the situation of our days, the situation where we have still no some clear version of the Russian history, some clear version of the historical identity of the current post-Soviet state, and still unclear place of the revolution and the experience that came after the revolution. So there is still no clear place for Soviet as a period of time, as the experience, as a project in the current history as a part of the ideology. So you can say that this kind of museums is a kind of weakest parts of the ideological chain. So it's places which problematize these weaknesses of ideology by its own existence. And that was the most interesting moment of this kind of places for me personally, and for my colleagues, artists, with whom I collaborate during my experience in Moscow, Presny Museum of Russian Revolution 1905. And I think somehow after our discussions with Ilya that he starting maybe from the different point of view, from different perspective, so he came somehow to the same thoughts, to the same ideas. Then I want to say a few words about the place of these museums in the current ideology and current Russian society by now. Well, you know that to simplify things, you can say that you have two strategies for the future of this kind of places. So one strategy you can call, or one praxis you can call conservative, where you just save this place, not try to change it, not try to reform it, because any type of change immediately lead you to very dangerous questions, where you have no answers. So, and one strategy is just to save it as it is. I can say that for most of such places, the main changes in the exposition mostly came in the beginning of 90s, when the future was very unclear, when government and new post-Soviet regime somehow tried to play with the question of the historical identity, but this game was stopped very early, and now we have just some elements of these attempts to change something in the attitude to the history. I mean, for example, if you look, I'm really sorry that I'm not focusing on this place, because I really hear, as most of you, first time. And but I think it's very interesting to discuss it based on the experience of many other places like this, which I know from my work and my practice in Moscow and in Moscow region. So in the beginning of 90s there were some attempts to change to change the concept of such museums. For example, in Moscow, the biggest museum like this, and probably on the national level as well, is a museum which now called the State Central Museum for Contemporary Russian History. And 20 years ago, it was the Central Museum of the Revolution. So it was like a capital of this empire of the revolutionary museums across all the Soviet Union. And this museum, which was also interesting, it was established in April of 1970 by the provisional government as the museum of the Russian liberation movement, and then this project was developed by Soviet government after. So what they tried to change in the beginning of 90s, firstly they tried to present a kind of objective picture of history, like to present different sides of the story, but the problem that museum can't work like this. So it can't be just places where all the voices presented, because museum is the place which have its own history by itself, and this own history, own genealogy of the museum, it's also historicized. So it's already part of history. So the museum is already a subject of history. And for example, this museum of the Central Museum of the Revolution, it started as a museum of the revolution. Its huge collection during decades was constructed as a collection of the revolutionary movement, not of the collection of the counter-revolutionary movement, for example. So if you want to transform the revolutionary museum to the counter-revolutionary museum, so you can't even technically, do it simple, even because the counter-revolutionary movement, it was a movement which was defeated by the revolutionary movement. And this counter-revolutionary movement, because of this historical defeat, it didn't create their own museum because it was defeated movement. You can't just skip all the story of the victories of the revolution and change it to the victories of the others just in a moment. So it's like a very serious, very unique project. And this project is a huge institutional project, because you need to systematically destroy one type of historical memory and replace it to the other. So in a country like Russia, it's really very problematic, even if you have a clear project for it. And our government has no project like this. But for example, in smaller countries like Lithuania, for example, so it was possible. So it was a clear project. The country was not so big, and in few years, I mean, to the end of 90s probably, all the Soviet monuments were destroyed, all the Soviet museums were closed. And the places of the older monuments were occupied by the new monuments. So Lithuania is like a good example how it's possible. If you have a clear project and the size of the question is not so big.
But is it good to close all the Soviet monuments?
I mean, if they have a clear continuity with the, because the main problem is like to create a clear historical identity on the state level. You need to clean the real history from all the ruptures and all the conflicts which really fooled this history during hundreds of years. So if you want to build a concept of national history, it should based on a very clear continuity. And that's why the 1970s it's such a big problem, because it was the rupture, it was a historical event, it was the moment which split the national history on two parts, and you can't mechanically reunite these two parts and present the situation like nothing really happened.
It was stressing the continuity between these kind of phases before and after. So that's not the only point of view, which is.
So to take.
Which example?
Oh, there's this famous big book by Nikolai Berdiaev, the Russian thinker, who was written a book, I think, sometime in the 20s.
History of Russian
русского коммунизма, the roots and the sense of Russian communism, where he says that it's...
But that will be legitimization of communism, somehow, if you take the Berdyaev concept.
Maybe.
I don't think so, that we need to legitimize communism somehow.
But it's not about break, so you could tell some
the real political question that we have for now, how to save Soviet legacy, how to save anti-Soviet legacy, the legacy of the Russian Empire, and how to combine it in the one project where the state as the institution stay in the middle. So it's like a core of the concept. So that the history of Russia, it's a history of the Russian state. And you need to, so that's why Berdyaev is not working. Because it's not a good idea to build identity of the state based on this kind of concept.
But could you base it on the Russian state? This is also kind of a problematic point of departure.
Yes, it's. I mean to build it on the tradition of the Russian Empire.
You said Russian state. So is it Russian tradition? Is it?
But for example, so we are in a place where Lenin, but it's very important, by the way, because the great Lenin's book about the state and revolution, it was somehow completed here after Lenin get these notes from Stockholm. Okay, yeah. So this book, even in the Soviet time, was very problematic book. It was the most problematic Lenin's book, which never was totally adopted by the current Soviet ideology, because the current Soviet ideology was many times in trouble because of this ruptures and these breaks and splits of the real history of the revolutionary movement, of the Bolshevik party, of the Soviet state itself, which come out again and again, like I don't know, the role of Zinoviev, who lived here, for example. And the State and Revolution, it's Lenin's book, where he clearly says that we need to destroy the state. So that is the main idea of this book. That is what our revolution is about. How to destroy state and how to make the great change from the state mode of living of humanity to the post-state. So, and that book became a part of the state education in one of the most powerful and repressive states in the history.
Exactly.
So, and all these types of stories is it's really the most of the elements which history is really constructed. And the main question is coming to the question of museum, of how to clean the history from all these ruptures and present any kind of continuity. And I think that I may be talking too long, and maybe I will just give a last phrase and finish, and then answer questions, and we can discuss whatever. But
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But can I ask you a short question?
Yeah.
You mentioned strategies, different strategies
Yes,
that state
Yes.
probably can use to reconstruct some exhibitions to change the role of museums. But and you mentioned also that this is your first time here in this museum, and this is a new exhibition. And can you comment it? Which strategy was used there?
So well, what kind of strategies you have? So you have a conservative strategy, not change anything. You have different types of institutional strategy. So how to present this place as the place of culture. It's not a place for ideology, it's not a place for political debates, but a place where people can share their experience, where they can learn the history of their country and of their local place. A museum which became part of the entertainment. So all these kind of things, which is really something that is highly recommended by the Russian Ministry of Culture, by the way, because now we are going to the more and more serious process of the cutting of the budget expenses for culture. And one of the main strategies of the ministry is that this kind of museums, they should somehow orient how to survive without state. So that is some other moment of contradiction, because they should present some version of history, but help the state, but without state. And invite society to help them.
Audi is sponsoring the outside.
It's really, I'm here for the first time, and it's really hard for me to comment even this exact exhibition. But the third strategy, which sometimes connected with the second, is some attempt to transform museum, to transform the exposition, which turned to the political polemic with the previous narrative of the museum. So I have this feeling here that he was a bit dependent of German Secret Service. But it's just my version, because I'm here for the first. I just see some faces, and that's why I. Yes?
So do you think there's a fourth way or a fifth way to do it?
Yes, and I think that in fact there is a fourth way, which is a kind of utopian way, because it was never realized. Maybe my experience, it was just some small attempt to realize something like this. Maybe Ilya's experience as well. So I think that this project should be a project which give a place for all the type of the hidden conflicts and hidden clashes in this kind of museums. And these conflicts and these clashes, they can't just come out from the changing of the exposition, but they should come out through the daily practices of this museum, through the many different projects which problematize, split, and open all the possible problems and hidden crucial points of the history in the space of the museum.
But it could be interesting to have the museum as a museum of the museum. To have an exhibition.
Yes, but
let me finish. To have an exhibition showing how this thing was presented, for instance, in the 70s. I think that the weak part of this museum is that it's so updated. You know, you have these big prints on both sides of the wall, you have the smash prints hanging here to make it a kind of modern. But I would be much more interested to see the museum, how it was presented in the 70s, because a museum is also an educational thing. People are expected to come to learn. And the history of education is one of the most interesting histories we have, because we are sitting 4 or 5 generations and we are all educated in a different way, talking about actually the same subject. So to visit this museum and to see this was the way the Russians were taught about Lenin in the 70s, without any comment, would be a big comment for the future.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think that is, yes, museum is about knowledge, but museum, I mean the historical museum of what you can say contemporary history, or the history of the 20th century, it should be also the place of memory. It's the place where people can express their individual stories about their families or about their own. I can say that, for example, in a museum where I worked, on this museum of 1905, there was a part of the exposition about Russian 90s, about 1991 and 1993, because in fact this museum it's not just a museum of Russian Revolution, the first Russian Revolution in general, but it's a museum of that area, Presnya. It's very center of Moscow for now. And in 1905 it was the working class suburb, which was the main stage for the December uprising, workers' uprising in the December of 1905. But because we have a White House, just in 5 minutes walk to this museum, all the historical events of the beginning of 90s, it's also happened in the same area. And exactly in the same places where the first Russian Revolution was taking place. So that's why we, so one of the prize for this kind of normalization role of the museum, which represent just the local history of the area. So one of the prize for it, it was the part of the exposition dedicated to the 1991 and 1993, and that was really very interesting to give excursions there, because when I walk in this museum, I normally had like 1, 2, 3 excursions a day. And the most interesting place was the moment of these excursions. It was the moment when we come with people to the part of the exhibition dedicated to 1983, for example. Because in that moment, they start to tell me something, but not just I'm telling them. And that was a kind of dialogue. And in that moments you feel how museum works and how museum became a real place of the memory, the place which turned people to think about their own life, about their own experience, their own story and life and experience of their generation, of the generations of their fathers, grandfathers, and so on. And that's why I think this continuity, not the historical continuity, but the continuity of the place, it's also very important. And that is one of the central role of the historical museum, to show, to present the history, even the history of 200, 300, 400 years ago, for just common people, is there as also a part of their own history. Not to build the distance between the history and the visitors, but to smash this distance, to destroy this distance. And I think that this kind of forced strategy for the museum, and even for the museums like this, should be based on this, smashing the aura of the revolutionary museum.
And I think I need to add. I need to add a little to answer Ilya's answer, that we actually tried to recreate vitrine as a fragment of original 1964 exhibition, and we recreate this installation inside this showcase. It was our idea to repeat it 3 times also.
But and we take the authenticity away. We saw the little cattle in the original photographs, and the mother and the son looking at the original cattle.
Yes, and we can see this object there also.
And now we have it 3 times here, reproduced, a new cattle.
New kettles, yes.
Of the object and how people look at the original object where Lenin made tea. I assume it was the, I don't know the English word for kettle. Teapot. The teapot. The teapot where they made fire.
But it wasn't also, it wasn't original.
It wasn't original.
It wasn't original.
But it was perceived as original.
We play also with it
yes.
meaning, but it is not the main sense. And also I wanted to ask to remind a very interesting thesis, what as I remember exactly was in one of your articles about violence of oppressives.
Yes.
The thesis that these museums is the museums of the violence of the oppressives.
Yes. So, in fact, yes, it's one of the most important questions about the revolutionary museums, because the revolutionary museums somehow they express the history of violence, the historical violence, the revolutionary violence, and they express how violence change history. And from that point of view, this there is one of the contradictions of this, even the place of these museums, is the contradictions that the museums which try to represent the continuity of history, try to normalize history, they are in the same time still has the essence which act exactly against any kind of normalization. And from that point of view, I turn with these questions of the violence in the museum, I turn to Sorel writings on violence, where he, I don't know if you know this work of Georges Sorel, the French radical left thinker of the beginning of the century, who was a person between anarchism and Marxism, very original philosopher, and very influential for Walter Benjamin, for example. And in his main book, this reference, Reflections on Violence, I think. On violence. Yes. So he had this idea that the main problem of the state is the problem that state tried to take the monopoly of violence and to take the ability of violence from the both antagonistic classes of the society. So proletariat and bourgeoisie, from the beginning, they were in their violent confrontation. The essence of this confrontation is based on their antagonistic place in the class society, but all the history of capitalist development, we see how this conflict, this hidden civil war, how it's more and more taken by the monopolization of violence by the state. And for this reason, the state itself became more and more violent, or more and more able to use violence. And both the antagonistic classes, even the oppressors and the oppressed, they became more and more disarmed. There is no open conflict between the classes.
Equalize.
So you have the state which stay between all the type of the interaction between the classes, and for this reason, as Sorel explained, it's right the question of moral. So that bourgeoisie and proletariat from different perspectives, from different positions, but they more and more missing their morality, the violent fighting, resisting morality. And just last question. So, and my idea was that somehow the neoliberalism as the ideology, as the new order of things, is a kind of the rebirth of the morality of the bourgeoisie. So we see how bourgeoisie reclaim morality, and how they reclaim even the possibility to create their own heroes like Reagan and Thatcher, who are really fighting violent, brave type of moral heroes. So they're not just bureaucrats, but they are real fighters. And all the neoliberal project is full of this logic of more morality, creativity, become more brave, strengths, not afraid of any kind of violence. That you can say that you have the and at the same time you have the regulation of the state and the situation where the state lost its position in between more and more. But the main problem is that you have the rise of the morality on the other side. So on the other side you have zero morality. You have no new heroes like Joe Hill or any kind of Lenin or so this type of moral figures. And but they exist only in museums. So museum is the only place where the morality of the other side is really presented. And it's very strange because it's presented only
occasionally.
Yes, occasionally. Just because they're not already destroyed or not already transformed to the zoo, or for some reasons that is not really dependent on some class subject which are interested to defend these centers of its own historical morality. So and that is very interesting moment in the current position of such museums. And that's why we should defend them. We should defend even the existence of this kind of museums. Not just because it's a good place to realize the best, this force strategy, but as a place itself. It's very important that this place are still existing.